So, if you are a parent of a child with more than one diagnosis, especially if it involves mental health and developmental disabilities, you probably know there is a lot of red tape to go through, right? And you also probably need to remind yourself to be cautious about what you accept and what you know is best for your child, so we can make sure that your child gets the supports, the coordinated supports and services that they need. And so this is going to be a great topic, I think, for a lot of families, because it can be so frustrating when you're trying to deal with two separate systems, a developmental disability system, the mental health system, and trying to merge those together. Then you have the public schools, you have private therapists. So we have a wonderful guest with us today, and she is going to help share some of her stories, but also we're going to be looking at possibilities to create more collaboration. So welcome to Tricia Ellinger. How are you today?
I'm great. I'm great, Charmaine. Glad to be here with you.
Well, I think your stories are so powerful, and you will be helping so many families by, one, just identifying that these issues are there and that other parents know that they are not alone in experiencing all of this. So I'm really thankful that, we got to meet virtually first, right?
Absolutely.
And that we were able to be connected. And I just, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about your background. I know you've been a school counselor for years.
Right. Yeah. So, I was a school counselor for 12 years. 10 of those years was in a K-3 school with about 550 students. And then I spent 2 years in a very small school district, K-12. And so that was and then I was also in private practice as a therapist for a number of years. And so, that was kind of my professional experience before I myself became disabled, and then the adventure of adopting a sibling group came along. And so, as Charmaine had kind of said, we're going to talk about co-occurring or coexisting disabilities, the developmental disability world, and this may not be politically correct, but my kids really are seriously emotionally disturbed, and so they are served in the children's mental health system. And there's really some parent advocacy. Charmaine is great about helping foster that advocacy and speaking up. And we're going to talk about my story of how I advocated within the children's mental health system, which is really called the Youth Empowerment Services System and the Developmental Disabilities System. So when I was a school counselor for 10 years in that school that I just absolutely loved, as the school counselor, I worked with the most difficult children. They may not have been served on an IEP. They may have been, but really did not see a lot of the co-occurring. Those were few and far between. And so you got your traditional child with some mental health issues, or you have your kids that are served in special education with developmental disabilities. But I didn't really see an overlap until I experienced it. And so it was completely shocking and just an eye-opening experience. So, I had this adventurous life. I have 2 adult children, and that I like to dirt bike and hike and even scuba dive and things like that. And then due to unforeseen circumstances, I became the guardian of a 3-sibling group. They are my relatives. And so they came to me, and they're full biological siblings. They used to be my great nephews and great niece. I took them out of foster care out of Texas originally, then Washington State foster care. They also had some involvement in the Idaho child protection system and I believe New Hampshire. And so they were pretty involved, especially the older boy involved in the child protection system. But I chose to become their legal guardian. And that became a permanent situation when they were just 2.5, 1 year old and 4 months old. So they were quite little, all in kind of diapers. But my 3 kids have some pretty heavy-handed labels. My oldest adopted son has reactive attachment disorder, attention deficit disorder, intellectual disability. His full-scale IQ is 63. Disruptive behavior disorder. My daughter has a developmental disorder, ADHD, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder. And that's just the 2 older ones. So then we get to the next one, and they're all very close in age. My youngest has autism. He's treated for ADHD, a mood disorder. All 3 of them have a sensory processing disorder. And the 2 boys have labels of fine and gross motor delay, as well as receptive and expressive language delay. So, wow, they are a handful of everything that you could possibly imagine, with really significant trauma histories. So even though they were very young, attachment and bonding happens in utero, and that really didn't occur in the natural way that it should occur. And then subsequently, the trauma that occurred with their biological parents, they have a pretty significant trauma history. So really, we've been on this journey for 7 years. And when I look at our family and how do we fit in our little rural community, and how do we fit in the state of Idaho, how do we fit in our nation, we don't really fit. We stand out. We're pretty loud. We're demanding. And I think for us, with all those heavy-handed diagnoses, we are often in a state of crisis. It's just reality. And so Charmaine, would you go to the PowerPoint?
Sure.
And so my thoughts, as I tried to articulate these things for the Department of Health and Welfare and some other individuals who became involved in our lives, I really felt like I was at a point of mayday. Our family was in crisis. But when you get stuck in a boat, I like this quote, it's not mine. If there's no wind, then you must row. And so that is certainly the truth. We go on here. Well, let me just get to my PowerPoint. My PowerPoint is frozen up, Charmaine.
I know, it looks like it.
Okay.
Wants everybody to absorb.
So I want to explain to you there's my family. We're the Ellingers. And that's my adult son there. And then the gal in the jacket, the cream colored jacket, that's my adult daughter. And this is a picture from, probably a few months before we finalized adoption. So there's my 3 little darlings. As you can see, they're all about the same size. They're about the same age. And that's definitely our family from some years ago. And really in happier times when they're little and they're kind of toddlers. I know that parents complain that toddlers are difficult, but gosh, they sure were easier than they are now. You know, we live in the state of Idaho, and this is a couple of years ago. Again, they're very close in age. They're very close in size. But we live in Idaho, and Idaho has a very limited comprehensive or collaborative treatment for young children. So my kids are young, and they have these co-occurring disabilities. So children's mental health, or as I always term it, seriously emotionally disturbed, and these developmental disabilities. And so if you're not involved in the juvenile correction system or the foster care system or some other systems, you really are stuck trying to navigate these systems. And in Idaho, the truth is, those systems don't work very well together. they don't even always speak the same language. There's not a lot of cross-training that occurs.
Right.
And so if you're not really firmly understand, you need, as a parent, need to be firmly understand what those two systems are. And then you spend a lot of your time training others. This is what the system is. This is what's available to me, and then working together. But it really, in Idaho, with our systems and the lack of collaboration and communication and really using the same language, my family feels like we're a boat and we're drifting among two oceans, and we're getting dashed among the shores. We just don't even know where to go. When you read program descriptions and each service provider or agency tries to put this great description and characterize what they offer, well, my kids aren't a program. They aren't even a label. And so I just want my kids to be healthy, happy, successful. And fitting that happy, healthy, successful kid into a program description has been difficult. And so truly navigating this world is like we're drowning. Our boat is sinking. And you have a crowd of onlookers. You have school and agencies, and they're all shouting support from the shore, but they don't want to jump in the water and get wet and try and help you. And so I really want to share how we got to a point of collaboration and getting to yes. So this is my description. This is my metaphor. So it's like having a boat in the Atlantic Ocean. Not that the Atlantic Ocean is good or bad. It just is that you have a boat and not a very large boat in this world. And then you have your same boat has to go all the way around to the Pacific Ocean to gain access to services in another ocean. And so it's incredibly difficult and challenging. And that doesn't even include what I call Canada, who is a pretty neutral country, but they're distant from my oceans and they have border guards. So you can enter public education under certain circumstances and IEPs under certain circumstances, and there's border guards that are doing some checking to allow you to be able to do that. So as we drift along these oceans, my family, our boat had taken on too much water, and so it really became a crisis point about a year ago. What I want to share with you is a story that I heard, and I'm just going to loosely tell it. But when we think of ourselves as helpers or as parents or people, that when you see someone drowning, and whether it's a lake or a river or a pond or a swimming pool, when you see someone that's drowning, do you walk by and shout, "Hey, I'm here for you if you need me. Let me know if you need anything"? Well, we all know that's not what we're going to do, right? We're going to figure out this person's is going to drown. They're going to die. And so we think, oh gosh, I don't even know how to swim. What do I do? Well, I can call 911. Well, I can grab a life preserver. I can grab a rope. I can shout from the rooftops and I can get someone to help. Some of us who are good swimmers can jump in, drag that person to the shore and say, start providing some life-saving, services. But that rescue, however it looks, it doesn't matter. As long as a service, as someone is providing that life-saving support. And so my experience has been, we've had lots of cheerleading, a lot of people coming by and saying, "Hey, I'm here for you." But they're not willing to get into the water or figure out what is it that they can do. Because when we're saving someone from drowning, all of those, we need to call 911. We need to get the person out of the water. We have to find a way to support them. We need to provide CPR. And so it doesn't really matter what you do to provide that service. It just matters that you provide that service. And so, collaboration is an effort that takes a lot of people. So we had this boat, and we were going along, and really we came to a crisis. We had taken on water for 7 years, for 6 years, too much water coming into the boat, and I wasn't prepared for it, even though I was a professional and had lots of experience. I had raised my own 2 biological kids successfully. I was not prepared for this situation that I was in. And I was calling Mayday. I was in a storm. So, this is my idea of what a beautiful boat would be. I'd be just in this quiet, serene place, and I could go out and be on a lake or in a nice little area. But my family, the Ellingers, we are really pirates. We are loud and sometimes obnoxious, and sometimes we have to take things over. And these are my little people. And this was a Halloween a few years ago. We were pirates. That was our theme. And so we dressed up as pirates. But this captain really needed to have some people on my team to make our system work. I knew that my oldest little guy here at 2.5 was special. I knew he had some needs, and I wasn't overwhelmed at first. I thought, I can do this. I've done this with other families. This is going to be super easy. It wasn't and hasn't. The trauma that he experienced up until age 2.5, his biological genetics play a big part into it. Some of the trauma that occurred in utero affect him. And so I was hopeful until the dark cloud descended over me. And if you are a parent, either in the DD world or in the children's mental health world, when they start bringing in those assessments, and you're having neuropsych reports and child psychiatrists, and they're recommending things like occupational therapy and speech therapy and sensory integration, throw in some attachment therapy and some medications. And if, as a parent, let's send you to some parenting classes, because that might be helpful. You throw in special education, and we did preschool. You get into the DD world and you get some services. They've changed names now, but I traditionally call them habilitative intervention. The list just goes on. And so you're piling buckets of water, this rain, this storm coming into your boat. And so my little 2.5-year-old was kind of like a little feral cat. He was nonverbal. He screeched from the minute he woke up in the morning until he went to bed. He tried to eat out of garbage cans. He was just this little feral cat, and having a little feral cat on a boat was with 2 little babies was pretty challenging. And so my efforts, we lived in the Magic Valley at the time. I started with a pretty good team. I felt like this is manageable, but then we moved to Emmett, and the kids got older. The other 2 children developed, it became obvious that they were developing some needs that hadn't been identified before. And the incredible needs for all of them. So we came to Emmett, and this great provider said to me, your one identified child is not the only child who has needs. Your other 2 kids need assessments. They need neuropsychs. They need medication management. They qualify for developmental therapy. They qualify for children's mental health. And I was just like, I am one person. And so as we got our team going here in Emmett and reaching out to the Treasure Valley, again, I found myself constantly calling out for Mayday, Mayday. This is too much. This is too much going on. I was no longer the cruise director of my ship. I was no longer that mom. We had run into rough waters, and we needed some pretty serious collaboration to get things going. We had so many services at one time that during a summer, I was going to, picking up, participating in 23 appointments a week.
That's amazing.
23 appointments a week. And so it's like, okay, so this kid can go to daycare. This kid can't go to daycare. Okay, this person's going to be with this worker at this time. Okay, I got that. Who can meet this child because I have to be in the Treasure Valley at another assessment. And so it was this constant juggling. I had one kid in daycare, one kid in a private daycare situation. I had, it was just constantly taking on too much water. And it really is overwhelming. I mean, if you're not overwhelmed already by listening to this, I'd be surprised. But this is our life, and this was our life, and it's not. It has not been easy. We were really struggling. I wanted to be lake kayaking. If you've ever kayaked on a lake, it's just really lovely. But we weren't lake kayaking. Instead, last summer, my oldest adopted son, pretty much for lack of a better word, had a kind of a psychotic break. And he became homicidal and suicidal, and was having sexual predatory behaviors towards his siblings. And I know that sounds, those are all just words. Well, it was an experience that we were all having. We had our providers. We had just ended school year. We had psychiatrists involved in children's mental health. Child Protective Services became involved because people got concerned about what was going on. Was I able to protect the other two children? Was I doing enough? Was it, I don't know, 23 appointments a week sounds like I'm doing enough. I tried to get law enforcement involved. I thought, well, maybe they're going to be a good, maybe they'll send me a rope. No. So the storm came, and we have all these systems involved. And it really was overwhelming because we weren't collaborating. You can see those lines. All those people are directly talking to me or my family, but they're not talking to each other. And that's a problem. We have some providers, the counselors throwing us a line. We have Children's Health throwing us a line. What do you think about this service? We have Child Protection saying, well, you don't really qualify, but what do you think about family preservation services? Psychiatrists willing to change medications. The school saying, thank heavens you're not here because it's summer break. And so in all this time, you still have annual assessments, paperwork, meetings to go through when your family's in crisis. You still have to keep those obligations even if your family's in crisis. And so here I am. We've got our Pacific Ocean and our Atlantic Ocean. And we have our boat in this storm, and periodically someone throwing us a life preserver. But what happened that was the ultimate final straw for me when I truthfully called the governor. I wouldn't recommend that. But what really happened for us is that some people had encouraged me to legally abandon my son. I privately adopted him. I am his permanent parent. Being suggested to terminate your relationship with a child because the system is broken is the most hurtful and painful thing that you could do to someone. Not that I'm saying that isn't sometimes appropriate for some people, but it was very painful. And so fortunately, I had some collaborative partners that I had met who said, no, that's not the answer. We're going to get your boat, and we're going to get you collaborating and working together in such a way that it's not so painful. And so, fortunately, my collaborators, the Idaho Parent Network, the Idaho Federation for Families and Children's Mental Health, and there were lots of other people who said, this is the process to get your child into some residential care. Because honestly, in the Treasure Valley, for a 9-year-old boy, he was 8 at the time, an 8-year-old boy who has an IQ of 63 with sexual predatory behavior, homicidal, suicidal, and these great developmental delays, there's not a facility for someone to treat him.
Right.
Okay? There is not a place that can meet his needs. So part of it's age, part of it's, we can do children's mental health. We do that pretty well, but we don't do developmental disabilities. We can do developmental disabilities, but we don't do violent people. We can do developmental disabilities, but we don't do people who have sexual predatory behaviors. And so when you look at all the different options that are available, group homes or other treatments, there was nothing in all of Idaho. He was in the emergency room and then at St. Luke's downtown for about a week because nobody would, in Idaho, no acute care facility would even take him. There were no beds, but they're like, we wouldn't know what to do with him. I mean, and that's when I called the governor.
Yeah, really?
I called the governor. And you know what that happened is that team of all the departments came together, and there was this giant meeting at St. Luke's with probably 25 participants who said, look what happened to this family. We broke down. Our system is broken down. And she's being told, well, child protection could get involved because law enforcement says you can't have your son at home because you have to protect your other 2 kids. And some people are telling her to legally abandon her child, which then, there's consequences for that. And what I felt like the supportive thing that actually happened from that trigger pull was, no, we don't make families give up their kids in Idaho. So we ended up with a crisis residential placement. Unfortunately, it was in Arkansas, far, far away. He was in Arkansas for about 6 months, and then he's gone to Georgia to a beautiful, wonderful facility that really treats the DD piece and the children's mental health piece. It's on a beautiful outdoor, has a big pond, a lake, equine therapy. I just can't say enough about the facility, but it's really difficult to find a facility who can treat the DD aspect for a child who's 9, 8, 10, and who can also work on those children's mental health issues. That's a big thing to ask for. And so after 6 months not doing so well in Arkansas, we found this other facility, and he's growing and doing great. In fact, he's coming home next week. And so there is hope. I would have not said a year ago that he would ever come home, but he has grown so much with the right treatment. So the right treatment has helped him be successful.
I bet. And so how did you get those 25 agencies to come together at St. Luke's Hospital and sit down and actually start talking to each other?
So really what happened is I had been calling all these 25 people. And then the social worker at St. Luke's is calling these 25 people. And she says, they're not returning my calls. I'm getting mixed messages. And I said, welcome to the world of living in 2 different oceans. Mental health says it's a DD issue. DD says it's a mental health issue. And so it was really that trigger pull, like I said, of calling the governor. And I don't know who he called. He made, I think it was some department chiefs that were called and said, that we're done. We're done. Everyone has to get on the same page with this family in the same room at the same time. Now, I want you to know you don't have to pull the trigger like that. And so we'll get to that. We'll talk about how building and creating those collaborative systems. There are some easier ways to do it. And there's some harder ways to do it. And I certainly, if you need to advocate by calling the governor, please do that. But there's other ways to get there without having to pull that trigger. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about Canada. And Charmaine laughs at this, but
I love it. I love your metaphor.
Otherwise known as our public education system. And so I have these 3 kids who have IEPs, and my 2.5-year-old had been in the, he went to preschool, and then my 7-year-old was in preschool, and my child in the middle who didn't really fit anywhere. We knew she was delayed, but we did private preschool. She started kindergarten with a 504 plan. But here we are in Canada, and tell me, I'm just tell you, you don't want to run aground with your boat into Canada because you just want to, I want to put my anchor in, and I want to feel like it's okay, but I want a little bit of distance. But if you run aground, there could be some problems. And so let me tell you a little bit about what happened with our public education system. So my son went to residential, and I thought, I can relax, right? I'm ready to really strengthen my 2 kids, strengthen our family, make some sugar cookies and go to the zoo. And I thought I was going to be great. That's not what happened. My kids went to school in the fall last year, and I told all this, they had IEPs, and we got there, and I said, they had this big trauma experience over the summer, and my son's gone, and oh yeah, we've got it covered. I was so excited. I was so excited. What happened? So they were in that last year, they were in first grade and second grade, is that very early on, they were experiencing excessive use of restraints and seclusion. They have serious emotional disturbances. They have serious emotional behavior issues. I don't deny that. They're non-compliant. My little girl with the red hair, she is just a firecracker. They have attention deficit, autism. And so let me explain a little bit if you're not familiar. Restraints are anytime you restrict someone's movement. So putting your hands on someone, holding them down, holding their arm, carrying them to another room, those are restraints. Seclusion is defined as being isolated in a room, physically prevented from leaving. So whether the door is locked or not locked, if that child, that little 5-year-old can't leave of his own free will out of that room, he's being restrained. Our school and district like to call it a refocus room. The room is a concrete closet with it does have a bright light in there, and it has a slit window. It's not carpet, it's that linoleum on the floor, and that's it. That is it. That is your seclusion refocus. I've encouraged people to go try and refocus in that room for 10 minutes. It is not an inviting place. And for my little autistic kiddo, he went to kindergarten and first grade in the gen ed program. So he came from preschool, and they thought, oh, this kid is really great. He just needs some OT and some speech. And they sent him to gen ed. And so throughout his kindergarten year, I think he spent more time in restraints and seclusion than he did in the classroom. And there's one documented incident where he spent 2 hours in the seclusion room. And he's only in kindergarten for 2.5 hours. So with that being said, of all you parents saying, oh, I would never tolerate that. What I learned through networking is that, hey, you can write a letter to your district and you can ask for an IEP amendment that says, my kid will never be in seclusion for longer than whatever amount of time you choose. I chose 15 minutes. I would be then phoned if my child because honestly, if my kid isn't calmed down in 15 minutes, there's probably a reason, and we need another intervention level. And so, so I learned that after that year of restraints and seclusion. But so
Well, and then the other thing, Tricia, I think is like you were saying, your school district even has a policy about restraint and
Right.
seclusion. And technically, what they were doing was within the parameters of that policy.
Correct. Correct. So they have to notify the parent. They have to take detailed documentation. They have to keep a little log. Those things, so that's legally sound, right? We want to look for a policy that's legally sound. However, there's this piece of the definition of when restraints and seclusion can be used. There is a little bit of federal guidance, not a lot of state guidance, but the general rule of thumb for restraints and seclusion are this. If a child is imminent threat, it is an imminent physical threat to themselves or others, restraints and seclusion can be used. Now, my kids are 5 and 7, or 5 and 6. To myself as an educator, I'm thinking, how much damage could a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old do? As a school counselor for 10 years in the same school, I was telling Charmaine this yesterday. There were 3 incidences of restraint and seclusion in that building in 10 years, and with 2 children. So one child had 2 incidences of restraint and seclusion, and one child had 1 incident. And why is that? That's because we did room clears. We built positive behavioral support plans that were out of the box. We used the lunch ladies, and we used the secretary, and we used the custodians. We ran laps in the hallway. You try to build and develop a plan to prevent restraints and seclusion. And you really have to have a school counselor or behavior specialist who says, these are my kids. I never want to see that kid have to be dragged down the hallway and law enforcement called or parent called because they're going to hurt themselves or others. And really, that's ideal. That is simply ideal. But it comes from really a paradigm shift or a thought process of how do we support a caring and concerned environment for all kids. Okay, our school is so loving and kind and supportive. They really are terrific people. They just don't know how to deal with kids like this. So you say, okay, I can look at autism. I can look at some mental health issues. You throw in another piece there of trauma. So really what happens when you lay your hands on one of my children, they're not expecting it. It's that reptilian brain of fight or flight.
Okay.
So my daughter last year, she was being non-compliant in music. And so they had the mentor come in and address her to be compliant. And she's a very slow processor. And if you're not familiar with Ross Green, he's like collaborating and getting to that point, right? And that can happen right there in the moment, right? And so I deal with that oppositional kind of behavior all the time. And so I just wait for her to kind of sort it out. Take as much time as you need, but I need you to come to music. And it looks like you want to do drumming. So how are we going to get our needs met here? Instead, that mentor put her hands on her shoulders. And as a result, my daughter hit her with the drumming stick and the mentor broke her arm. I brought my daughter home that day. So she had already had probably a good 2 months of restraints and seclusion in the school, plus the trauma from summer. And so I'm talking to my daughter and I'm like, what is going on? And she says, the voices in my head tell me to hurt people. I said, oh, wow. Does it tell you to hurt mom? No, just school people. Students? No, just the teachers. So what does that tell you? She loves her friends, but she's not feeling safe. These people are going to restrain and seclude me, leave me out because they don't know how to teach me. And so my little girl was in an acute care facility for 12 days right before Thanksgiving. Granted, she needed some medication sorted out. She did. And we needed to get those voices. What is going on? Was that a medication thing? Was it trauma from restraints and seclusion? Well, in the meantime of all these first 2 months of school last year, I had filed a State Department complaint. My kids were not getting their needs met. The restraints and seclusion was a big giveaway, but really they just didn't have the supports that they needed to maintain themselves. And so Canada wasn't a good experience. It wasn't a good experience for us last year. We got through it. We had more meetings, more amendments, more IEPs. We pulled in the State Department facilitator. I pulled in Charmaine. She was a great advocate for us. She taught me so much about language of IEPs, and wording, and being very clear in the wording of how things are said. Because again, a restraints and seclusion policy can be interpreted, so a kid picks up a book. Well, I'm in serious imminent threat of being harmed. Not really. You're not really. And so we had lots of meetings, and really, as I talk about collaboration and making relationships work, I'll bring Canada back in because they're not the bad guy. Really, they're not. I don't want to make them sound like they are. So, as you hear my story, or my kids' story, we really felt like we were left alone, just to battle the storms, to row ourselves, to cut through all that red tape. And it wasn't a good experience. It hasn't been a good experience until I developed some new skills, met some new people, did some networking. What I ideally, this is kind of my ideal, is I just want calm waters. I want butterflies. My daughter would say unicorns and rainbows. This is my ideal. And I haven't experienced that since I became my children's legal guardian and then their adoptive parent. But this is kind of what I want. This is what I'd like. I'd like to be moored somewhere quiet. I'd really like to be a cruise director, actually, going to the Bahamas. So here I am. I don't know if you've ever seen this picture before, but you're a gold, and you are a shark. They think you're a shark. And so, if there's one thing I want you to hear in my story today, is that you have to advocate for your kids, whatever that looks like. Connecting to other advocates, other parent advocates. Facebook and social media is a phenomenal place to find resources. You have to be persistent. You have to be aware of your own limitations. I have some pretty significant health problems, and I get pretty reactive. And so I have to be aware of that when I'm dealing with these systems. You have to have knowledge. You have to learn what these systems are, and you have to ask questions. And so, well, why am I in two different oceans? That doesn't make sense. And gain the knowledge so that you can make that bridge between those systems. You have to ask for help. I guarantee you that even with my professional experience, I was in no way equipped to do this alone. And the biggest part is building those connections. And so these are our connections. I'm one parent with 3 special needs kids in the DD world and the SED world. Again, that's developmental disabilities and serious emotional disturbance. And so if you look at my little chart here, we're kind of at the bottom. But as you see all these collaborators and squiggly lines and connecting lines and drag marks, I really feel like today I built a relationship and a team with my school. Every year it changes with the teachers a little bit, but admin is super great. The special education director's been phenomenal recently. So you've really got to nurture that relationship, even though you kind of burn some bridges. They really do want what's best. Sometimes they just don't know the right words to get to best. So understanding trauma was a very difficult thing for them. Fortunately, we had a great counselor last year who really educated the whole staff on trauma-based learning, kids from trauma. One of my great advocates out there is the Idaho Federation of Families and Children's Mental Health. If you don't know them, I would definitely connect and reach out to their Facebook page or their website. We have psychiatrists and med managers, counselors and therapists. DBH is the Department of Behavioral Health. And so that's their new kind of title, but it's really a piece of that is children's mental health. I haven't had a really great experience with them. Some people have. But if you have kids in the yes world, it's super important that you have a connection to an advocate or an ally there as well. Currently, we have a BCBA, so they're a person who does applied behavioral analysis, working with my autistic son in our home. She is a huge, she's a cheerleader and she's an advocate. Another agency, the ones who kind of saved me before I even needed to call the governor was the Idaho Parent Network. It's a network of parents living the children's mental health experience, and they really know how to connect you to the right people in every region. So if you need a collaborator, they're the people to call as well. I have a targeted care coordinator for my daughter. I have a developmental disabilities case manager. She is amazing. And if you don't have an amazing case manager, see what you can do to tweak that, because you need an amazing person. And another collaborator that came into our team was the DD in Court Services, DD Crisis and Court Services. We don't have court services involved in our family, but we're always in crisis, and I have these DD kids. And so they are a really good glue that kind of navigates in the back. They connect pieces, and we have a phenomenal DD agency here in Emmett. And so one last thing that I want to tell you about these collaborations. You need to share with these people, agencies, departments, your story, not so much the nitty gritty, the details, but you need to share your passion for your kids, and you need to share your hopes and your dreams. So my hopes for my 3 kids are very similar to my neurotypical kids. I want them to be happy and healthy. I want them to be semi-independent. And I want them to contribute to society in whatever way they can. That's my big dream, okay? Pretty simple. My fears are juvenile corrections. My fears are the restraints and seclusion school pipeline to prison that happens because we break down the relationships with authority figures. My fears that my kids are going to become drug addicts. My fears are that my daughter's become a teen pregnant girl. Those are my fears. And so when you work with all these systems, share your passion for your hopes, and that together we can make this work. And also share those fears. My fears are very real. I think that many of us have similar fears. But honestly, there is some hope. And so this is my dream boat. So I've got some people on the side there cheering me on. And then I've got, another butterfly coming in to help, give us some speed with our mask there. You've got someone there on the side. They're making some repairs to one of the butterflies. And so this is really, together, anything is possible. So even though we have a very challenging family, this 7 years of experience in the Magic Valley, then now the Treasure Valley, is that collaboration can work. And you get those team members together, whether it's Zoom meetings, whether it's WebEx, whether it's phone calls, conference calls, IEP meetings. My State Department facilitator is so awesome because he hears me. He hears me, and even though he's neutral, he hears me. And so in the IEP in Canada, so he comes to Canada and kind of bridges some gaps. But you've got to get all these people working together. And this is what I need as a parent. I need my whole team working in the background so I can be the mama. Right? I want to be the mama. I want to be able to go to the zoo, and I want to be able to go bake cookies, and I want to paint rocks and hide them around Emmett. And so your team is, and so this is what I hear, because I get CC'd on everything. Oh, we have this appointment going on. We're talking about these things in the background, and we got this going on. We'll let you know how it goes. It's awesome and it's amazing, but you have to say, team, we got to make this work. And this is something I shared with Charmaine yesterday, is we're not a medical model society. Our family, we don't just have one identified patient. We are a family. And when you affect one piece of that system, it causes a ripple effect. So even if you do good things with one kid, it's going to affect all of us. If you make appointments for this person, all of us have to change what we're doing to make that happen. And so everything kind of has to work in harmony. And this is my ideal, really, that we're working together. You've got people cheering you. You've got people willing to come and get in the water wet with you. You have parent advocates. You have the Idaho Parent Network. You have the Idaho Federation. You have really good Idaho Parents Unlimited. Oh my gosh, they are such great educators. You really need to get all your team together. Part of it's you just gaining knowledge and then connecting the dots. But I just wanted to share that with you, Charmaine. This is our story, and I think really together anything is possible. It's my belief. It's my mantra now.
Well, and I totally agree. And it's that belief and that faith, right? That things are going to get better. And that hopefully the experience that everybody has had on your team will use that with other families too.
Certainly.
Because that's the thing, right? I mean, we want this to generate change in those systems and have people, the human beings, actually connect instead of, being these separate silos that never speak and never overlap, right? Because our kids are human and their needs overlap, right? There's not one set path for them.
Right. So the more I share my story, the more the feedback gets back to the Department of Health and Welfare. And they're looking at system changes to say, wow, and she's not alone. Right. I don't know the statistics. I should have looked that up. But there is a population of co-occurring disorders. So if you are a parent out there or an advocate or an educator, my story is not unique. My story might be unique because I've got 3 of them, but it's not unique. And so why do we have to continue to reinvent the language or reinvent the wheel? I'm hoping that my collaborators say, this is working. So in the YES program, there's this really neat component called the wraparound system, where they create collaborators. They have more resources available to them. That wasn't really something I was interested in because I thought I can do this, and really I have done it. It puts the burden a little bit more on the parent, but in that world of children's mental health, you have that wraparound service available for highly intense kids and families. And your DD case manager should be the person who's coordinating all the things in your DD world. But when you have those 2 oceans, you've got to bridge those gaps and bring everyone together. And so I think the word is getting back to the state of Idaho that we need to make this easier, not more complicated. We need to cross-train people. We need to understand you're not firmly anchored one place.
Right.
This is a person, and each of my kids have such unique personalities that not only do they have these labels, but they're these beautiful spirits. And if we look at their beautiful spirits, we want to help them grow. We don't just want to prevent or, squash things. We want them to grow and develop into people. And I really, I value the experience that everyone brings to me, their knowledge, because I share it, Charmaine. I share it with anyone I come into contact with. Call these people, check this out, connect to this person on Facebook. So I hope that people know that and feel confident about that.
Yes. And so do you want to speak a little bit? So here is a website that you can go to, and they also have a link on there for their national conference. And I'll be emailing out resources. And Dan is with us today, and he mentioned some resources in the chat. Julie Costin's new book,
Nice.
Belong, what Behavior is Belonging.
Awesome.
Um, and so we'll be sharing some other resources, but do you want to talk about this website and the national conference that you'll be speaking at?
Yeah, so the Parade Foundation is an organization that they created the CANS assessment. If you're in the children's mental health world, you'll know what that means. But they're creating this conversation. It's called Transformational Collaborative Outcomes Management. Really, the biggest part is transformational collaborative. And so they're trying to help systems like Idaho capture people's stories and make them relatable and make that system work better. And so I'll be presenting in November in the virtual cloud, sharing this story again nationwide so people can say, wow, Idaho has that problem too. Wow, this is kind of what she's done. How can we connect people so they're not in those two oceans? And so the Parade Foundation, it's worth a check out. It's worth it if you're a professional to take a look at their offerings. The Idaho Parent Network will also have a fall conference. You can go to their Facebook page. They'll have that coming out shortly. And that's Idaho specific. So if you have children in the children's mental health system, but they'll be addressing special education, juvenile corrections. You know, our children's mental health world touches every component of everyone's life. And so, yeah, it's super exciting. And so, yeah, that's what I'll be doing this fall.
Well, that'll be great. And then, yes, so the actual title is Behaving to Belonging.
Oh, awesome.
And then, yes, one of our favorites, right? Dr. Ross Green, Lives in the Balance. And also Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint. They've got a great Facebook group.
Yes, thank you, Dan, for that. They do have a great Facebook page.
Yeah, and I think it would be great for you to connect. I can, help you get connected to Guy Stevens from the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint, because I know that they also are collecting stories. And so that would be another great resource.
And I believe they're trying to get their movement to move nationwide, right?
Right.
So they want some Idaho collaborators to say, at least we need to establish a federal policy, and we need to, I'd like to eliminate restraints and seclusion personally, but have some guidance around the use of that. As I said, in 10 years, 3 times, that should be the norm. That should be the norm. And so, yeah, the Alliance and Seclusion group is awesome.
Right. And Lissa is here with us, and she's in Iowa. Listen to me. Idaho. I had somebody else tell me the other day when they introduced me, Charmaine from Ohio. And I'm like, no, I'm Idaho. So I appreciate everybody being here, either with us live or on the replay. And if you have other comments, resources that you want to share, just circle back here and post in your question or comment, and I can respond to them. But thank you so much, Tricia, for being here and sharing not only your story, but some solutions to it, right? I think so many times we get left with, this is the pain, but what is the answer? And through your trigger call to the governor, or getting people to actually sit down at the table is something that we need to see in all communities, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Charmaine, for allowing me to share.
Oh, you're welcome. Do you have any final words that you would like to pass on to our audience?
I just want to say there's hope. There is hope. And I've been drowning. I've been barely with my head above water. And I want you to know that there's hope, and don't give up. Don't give up on your child, and don't give up on yourself, because there is hope. Even in rural Idaho, there is hope.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. And we will be back next Thursday at noon Mountain Time. So I hope you can join us then. Until then, everybody take care and go hug our kids.